Hi everyone, this is part 3 and hopefully the final part of my looking into the Tower of Babel. In the last video, I made the comment that with the technology to read our mind and thoughts and intentions, we're in a digital inquisition. And we look at China and the social credit point system. It is about punishing us and keeping us in our place. But in the movie The Matrix, which is really popular for using to illustrate the concept people use for those waking up out of the system, Neo wakes up from his sleep, really, and he sees that humanity has basically been turned into a battery for these machines to run off. And when we look at the idea of an inquisition in the past, it's to keep us controlled through belief systems and thoughts. But the concept of a human battery, I was thinking about this, that if they can read our minds, they're not only harvesting us for energy, but also creativity. In the last few years, it's been a really big thing for corporations to make their employees sign papers or contracts on intellectual property. And that any idea that employee comes up with within that corporation is owned by the corporation. And if they can read our thoughts and minds before we even have, well, I don't know if it's before we have the idea, but basically on the concepts of or on the beginning of an idea that we have through God-given creativity, because we are all parts of a body. The Bible tells us we're part of the body of Christ, and what that means is that one is the hand and one is the foot, and everybody has their own part in the kingdom of God or Christ. Everybody has their own talents and their portion that God has given them to create a beneficial society, a positive society. And what the potential of telepathy, or as I was trying to apply that in the ancient world, people didn't have a language, or they had one language. In near-death experiences, people don't really have a language because they can communicate through thought and understand each other. And that in a corrupt Babylonian system, those thoughts that we have and those creative insights will now become owned by these people who are harvesting our creativity and our uniqueness. It's been documented that Bill Gates stole a lot of his ideas for Microsoft in the early days and that passed them off as his own. And these people at the 1% at the top, most of them have very little creativity or ability to come up with great ideas themselves. So what they are is they're like on the Silk Road, they are merchants, the middlemen that take other people's hard work and labor and make money from other people's creativity. And this is what they have been experts at for millennia now. Now with the ability to read minds via frequencies, we will be literal batteries for these people. Every creative idea that we have, every physical labor that we make will be owned by them and claimed by them. Currently in the Victorian state government school system, the schools are sending around letters to parents to sign contracts that the children's image that is taken from online learning or online websites is to be owned by the companies that take those images or make those images, and then also that they can ask the children questions without approval of the parents. And there's an interesting word for you: pair, couple, rent. And who do we rent the children of? Clearly the state. Or without prior knowledge of the parents, and that those images and recordings that they make, there will be no financial remuneration to the parents or the child. And most parents would probably sign these contracts thinking that things are innocent and that people don't have nefarious objectives from this. But with the way the world's going into this digital media and digital technocracy, owning your digital image is something that they want to do to make money from. Everything about you is being farmed. If a child wants to be an influencer or to make money from the internet via social media, and their parents have signed a contract for a company to own that image indefinitely because there were no dates on these letters, then I just want to know who owns that child's image now. Is it that company that you just signed away to the Victorian government? This is a Pandora's box of who owns your image, who owns your thoughts, and who owns your intellectual property. What is resonance? When specific fundamental frequency is created by any other object in the neighborhood of the original object responds to that frequency, and that the response is called resonance. Collective resonance is a felt sense of energy, rhythm, or intuitive knowing that occurs in a group of human beings and positively affects the way they interact towards a positive purpose. And I'd like to add in here, because the New Age movement, who are looking into a lot of this information, forget that this can also be used for a negative purpose. And as I was trying to point out in my last video, that karma isn't always about being good or doing right, because someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic doesn't care about doing good or right. And as we know, the 1% that rule this earth are genetically bred for narcissism and psychopathic tendencies and mental illness. And this is well documented in genetics because they are so inbred. And who they've inbred with, well, for some reason they want to keep a specific family line. And they know something, I believe, about what that family line is and why they want to keep it pure. It is not created by human beings, rather it emerges when they tap into the underlying unity, coherence, rhythm and flow of the universe. It can be felt as a physical level of connection facilitated by vibrational exchange that operates consistently whether or not we are communicating verbally or are even aware of its existence. It confirms to the laws of physics, among other things. The word resonance means resound, which indicates a flow of vibration between two things, in the case, two or more people. The word has been used in many contexts, such as psychology, where it connotes empathy, or in the spiritual realm, where oneness or unity of things is implied. Building on these, the physical resonant aspect of group dynamics are explored by the Resonance Project. Greater awareness and amplification of this level of connection between people, between groups and other larger forces may help us find out our way back to the knowledge and experience of our fundamental connections to one another and our environment, and enable us to make greater progress towards our common human goals than we have been able to do using idea exchange and analytic problem solving alone. So here we have this article stating that, through resonance and frequency, that we may actually have greater connection and be able to solve problems greater than we have in the past, because it's a process that is unique and different to what we have been using in the past or we haven't been tapping into. This ties into as I was saying, the stealing of intellectual property or personal creativity that is God-given. It is time to activate all of the ways we as humans can access information and allow it to guide us toward a future that enhances life and spirit instead of destroying it. Experience of collective resonance are more common than currently known, and our goal is to bring these felt experiences to conscious awareness, understanding their components and encouraging individual and group practices that allow for resonance to emerge in all kinds of situations, all and while respecting the mystery which remains the source of these occurrences. And there's no mystery about it. The resonance and the frequency comes from God. What are we really saying when we notice that we are on the same wavelength with someone else, that two people seem to be in sync with one another, or something sets the tone for something else? The Resonance Project is finding out. We've all been in sports arenas and stadiums where there's a full capacity of people and felt the energy from the crowd. We've been to music concerts, the same feeling of resonance, that the band is playing the music, a certain frequency that everybody feels and resonates towards. All humans, including you, are tuned to the natural harmonic frequency of the earth. This idea is called Schumann resonance and remains a relatively recent discovery in science built upon the same principles of Nikola Tesla's electromagnetic understanding of the universe. Here's how it works. Resonance is a scientific principle in physics that works with electromagnetic acoustics and engineering mechanics. Occurs when a given system tuned to a certain frequency begins to oscillate or amplifies the presence of a preferential external frequency. Those frequencies that maximize or amplify a given object tuned to a specific frequency are called resonant frequencies. Together, two frequencies have the power to influence each other if both are tuned in concordance for resonance. Yet only certain objects are so much in tune. Human frequency and the Schumann resonance. Humans also have a frequency in tune with the Earth. Your natural resonant frequency matches that of the Earth's itself. It's found in the Schumann resonance, which runs somewhere between 3 and 60 Hz to create the lightning that strikes the Earth. Much like the musical instrument, these frequencies resonate with the natural harmonics of the planet. This particular band of frequency was discovered by Winfried Otto Schumann, a German physicist who found it through mathematical prediction in 1952. Schumann resonance causes the friction that generates lightning between the ground and the ionosphere of the Earth, yet it is more than that. Schumann resonance is the very pulse of the Earth at 7.83 Hz, the frequency of Earth's natural harmonics. It is the natural resonant frequency of the planet and matches that of the human consciousness and at the optimal brain wave state. Now that's the optimal brainwave state I'm thinking for our current day, but was it a different resonance back in the ancient world? Therefore, Schumann resonance amplifies the same frequency that allows humans to enter a state of creativity, relaxation, and visualization with alpha brainwaves. That is why some consider that the sound of Schumann resonance at 7.83 Hz even heals the body. In this article written on Natural News, the Earth's natural Schumann resonances are being manipulated by CERN HARP when towers. So are they deliberately trying to do this? I think maybe they might be trying to get the Earth back into a resonance that it may have been in ancient times. The Earth's natural Schumann resonances are being manipulated by CERN harping when towers. The Earth itself has a heartbeat known as the Schumann resonance, and it has surrounded and protected all living beings in natural steady frequency of 7.83 Hz for thousands of years, and was identified as the sacred cosmic sound of the Hindus. Claims have been found that there is evidence that HARP, CERN and Gwen towers are manipulating Earth's natural heartbeat. Many believe the Schumann resonance is not only altered to control us, but we can also alter it depending on our own level of awareness. On June 2014, when the Russian Space Observatory system showed a sudden increase in activity with the spikes stretching from 8.5 Hz to 16.5 Hz, the Schumann resonances are oscillating magnetic frequencies that happen in the Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. They are said to be generated by electromagnetic changes within the Earth's core, which affects Earth and all life. When these natural frequencies get manipulated, it can have drastic results for Earth and all life. It's the greatest population control ever. A mass awakening. If we lived in a natural world, the Schumann resonance would increase awareness and we would have a mass awakening. But the powers that be don't want that to happen. By manipulating Earth's frequencies, they are manipulating all life. Chaos can ensure under the wrong frequencies control emotion. Upon the upside, Earth is still changing. Without all the manipulations happening, the Schumann resonances are still changing. But why? What research can mutually agree upon is that those shifts clearly mean change, and people are slowly waking up to the greater reality where thoughts will materialize in an instant. The SR and the shift that has been happening in recent years is among the best proof we have of this change. It has long been suspected that people acting on collective conscious level can impact magnetic field structure and create disturbances such as recent spikes. This is usually amplified during times of high anxiety, passion, and tension. Earth is raising her frequencies, and humans might be doing the very same thing due to our strong connection with Earth. With this in mind, perhaps we are a species with amnesia that are going through a spiritual and cognitive awakening. It is true that waking up to this reality would turn our entire culture upside down and nonsensical, making way for a new and improved concepts of history and life in general. CERN, HARP, and Gwen Towers might be manipulating the SRs, but collectively, we, as stated above, we too can manipulate Earth's heartbeat and SRs and overcome this destructive technology. Some things are much stronger than technology. And if you're a follower of the Electric Universe project or the Sapphire project, we know that it's not only the resonance is not only created on Earth, but the resonance is universal. And even if they can control resonances on Earth via these technologies that they've created, they cannot control the universe. And in the sight of the universe and the sight of God, they are less than bugs. So we need not fear in the long run. So with this article and concept in mind, it makes you wonder why they recreated the CERN building in the image of the Tower of Babel. You might have psychic abilities thanks to collective consciousness. Ever have the feeling that you know you're being watched, or feeling of thinking about someone just before they call? Some believe these feelings are merely coincidental or just happenstance, but the fact that they are common and something everyone can relate to leaves open the possibility that there could be a metaphysical mechanism at play. Now, researcher Rupert Sheldrake says he believes these occurrences are due to a psychic phenomenon that is evidence of a collective consciousness, and he's found his theory to show statistical significance. Sheldrake is most famous for his theory of morphic resonance, a concept that revolves around psychic capability, which he believes is innate in humans and animals. Morphic resonance states that processes and behavior in nature, particularly learned behavior, can be inherited and transmitted psychically. This theory has made him somewhat of a pariah in the scientific community, which labeled him as a heretic for entertaining such a seemingly nebulous concept. Nevertheless, he embraces the criticism and continues to pursue his research. In order to test his theory, Sheldrake conducted experiments on a group of subjects to see if they could actually predict who was calling them on the phone. He ran the test with two groups of callers, one that was known to the subject and another who were complete strangers. The two groups tested against each other to see if there was a notable link between those with an emotional connection. Sheldrake's subjects in each test group consisted of all four callers, providing for a 1 in 4 probability. In the group of callers with a strong personal connection to the subject, out of 332 trials among 37 participants, there was a 53% success rate of subjects correctly guessing who was calling, clearly better than mere chance. In the group where there was no familiarity, the subject predicted callers with a 25% likelihood, the same as chance. Sheldrake noticed one area of the experiment that might have been flawed was that callers were given a schedule of when they would be calling and could potentially divulge when they'd be contacting the subject next. But when he looked at the results, the control for this, he found no spikes in successful guessing. Does this hint at a psychic connection between people with a personal bond? Sheldrake took the experiment a step further and decided to ask subjects to give their level of confidence on whether they would accurately guess a caller. They could either say they felt confident, not confident, or just guessing. With this factor, these results changed dramatically. When subjects felt confident, they responded correctly 82% of the time. When they were unconfident, they were correct 35% of the time. And when they were guessing, their guess was only 25% of the time. An interesting factor in the experiment is that subjects were sometimes thousands of miles away from their caller. Sheldrake found similar results when conducting tests regarding promotions on email and text messages received. He also says he believes that while there might have been numerous factors skewing the results, intuition could have affected subjects who were told how they were doing. Overthinking can inhibit intuition, and therefore, a scenario where a subject was being tested or didn't know they were being tested, they should have possibly had a greater likelihood of knowing who was calling. Sheldrake conducted a similar experiment testing the psychic intuition of dogs and whether they know their owner is coming home. During one experiment to test the hypothesis, Sheldrake found that a dog went to the window looking for his owner 4% of the time she was out of the house, not intending to come home. However, once she started to make her way back home, the dog was at the window 55% of the time. Sheldrake's original theory of morphic resonance came from an experiment involving mice. The mice were put through a water maze before they progressively learned how to escape quicker. Their progeny, when put in the same maze, learned how to escape in fewer trials, and subsequently mice on the other side of the world learned how to escape quickly when put through the same test. The experiment showed evidence that a group of mice could genetically pass down learned behavior, and that this behavior could also be transmitted physically throughout an entire species, almost as if it was being uploaded to the cloud where individual members could collectively download it. This is one premise of Sheldrake's theory, and he says he believes it to be inherent in all species. A commonly known theory that bears similarity to morphic resonance is the 100th monkey theory, an anecdotal observation showing signs of psychic learning among monkeys on various islands in the Pacific Ocean. Monkeys on one island purportedly learned behavior from monkeys on another island once the 100th monkey learned the behavior. Sheldrake says this scenario is evidence of morphic resonance, but based on an idea of having to reach a critical threshold. He says he sees the process as more gradual. The greater the number of individuals that learn, the easier the task becomes for a species. Sheldrake's theory has some basis in Carl Jung's idea of collective unconscious. Jung's collective unconsciousness is essentially a foundation of archetypes and psychological motives that are inherent in humans. It differs from our personal psyches and complexes that are developed individually. Jung even refers to it as a psychic system of collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. Sheldrake expanded on this theory by postulating that this collective psychic system is growing and learning in real time. Could this be evidence that the species we are getting collectively smarter and that our collective consciousness is evolving? Or is the technology and the internet a physical extension of what Sheldrake is describing? And in the Bible, Matthew 18:20, Jesus tells the apostles, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." And this is the power of prayer, that where we gather together with the same intention as the body or the temple, which is a building, the building of the kingdom of heaven, that we can bring that intention into being, or we are bending to the intention of God. We can ask for healing. We can ask for situations to be solved as a collective body, a collective building, a collective church. So when we look at our current world situation and how the majority of humanity believe what comes out of the Talai vision, I personally believe that this is a not an experiment, but it's the use of collective consciousness to benefit their will. So with an understanding that humanity united under the same agenda can create a reality in the material world, and that Nimrod needed to collect the people together under the same intention to create his reality within the material world. It's the same in the kingdom of God. We are united under the same agenda, and that is to have a heart like Christ. So how do we get a resurrection body? Well, in Matthew 27, Jesus and the first fruit resurrected saints receive a resurrection body. And what's interesting with these photon particles or DNA quantum physics, it says that the particles can pass through other particles without force or without causing or needing vast amounts of energy to force them through. A final victory. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought out to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. Death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? All it would take is for the information instantaneously from another place, from the light, to change, and our bodies could be changed within the twinkling of an eye into a resurrection, incorruptible body. The DNA that makes us who we are, our genetic code, is coming in via a frequency, via a signal to our cells. Who we are is external from our body, which is just a clay pot that holds our spirit. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Our body uses chemicals and electrical impulses for communication. The central nervous system uses electrical current to communicate with the rest of the body. Sodium and potassium are responsible for causing the flow of the electric current throughout the central nervous system. The flow of the electric current is a one-way process terminating at a presynaptic neuron. Another chemical comes into play, namely calcium, which with sodium and potassium cause the release of further chemicals called neurotransmitters, which aid in the communication process. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and spinal cord. Signals from the CNS go via one-way system to the motor neurons, which in turn communicate with the somatic voluntary muscles and autonomic voluntary muscles to produce movement. Sensory neurons send signals to the CNS via a one-way system which interprets the information and acts accordingly. For example, if a person stands on a sharp nail, the information is communicated to the CNS. The brain then informs the foot to move away from the source of pain, all done within milliseconds. But how is it achieved? It is all a question of chemical and electrical processes. The cell body of the neuron initially receives the signal or stimulus. The signal is transmitted down the neuron axion, starting as an electrical impulse at the axion hillock. Without any stimulus, the neuron remains in a resting state. Even during this resting state, there is a constant flow of chemical ions between the inside and outside of the neuron. So the main chemical ions involved during the process of communication are sodium ions and potassium ions. In order for muscles to move, voluntary or involuntary, the brain must communicate with the muscles in order to move. The brain does this by sending the signal to the muscle. The signal is the result of chemical and electrical processes passing along neurons, which in turn pass that information onto neurons, for example, muscle neurons. So muscimol, also known as agarin or pantherine, is one of the principal psychoactive constituents of Amanita muscaria and related species of mushroom. Muscimol is a potent and selective orthosteric agonist for the GABA receptors and displaces sedative, hypnotic, depressant, and hallucinogenic psychoactivity. The colorless or white solid is classified as isoxazole. Muscimol is one of the psychoactive compounds responsible for the effects of Amanita muscaria intoxication. Ibotenic acid, a neurotoxic secondary metabolite or Amanita muscaria, serves as a prodrug to muscimol when the mushroom is ingested or dried, converting the muscimol via decarboxylation. So the Amanita muscaria mushroom produces muscimol. Ibotenic acid and muscimol, these two mushroom toxins impact the central nervous system and result in symptoms akin to alcohol intoxication. They are the primary toxins in the fly agaric Amanita muscaria and are responsible for psychoactive effects of that mushroom. So ibotenic acid and muscimol share the same basic chemical structure. Both ibotenic acid and muscimol easily pass through the blood-brain barrier, allowing them to directly interact with the central nervous system. Ibotenic acid structurally resembles the neurotransmitter GABA, and its derivatives readily bind to GABA receptors. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so ibotenic acid initially decreases brain activity, resulting in drowsiness. However, ibotenic acid outcompetes GABA for binding sites and remains bound to the receptors for a longer time. Additionally, ibotenic acid stimulates the synthesis of excitatory neurotransmitters such as glutamate. These two effects eventually result in a loss of neuronal inhibition by GABA receptors, increasing brain signal noise and thus causing mind-altering effects and seizures. What is GABA? Gamma aminobutyric acid. Gamma aminobutyric acid is an amino acid and the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter that sends specific brain signals across nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. The compound binds to the GABA receptors to offer many essential benefits to the brain and body. GABA plays a vital role in anxiety, fear, and stress. The binding activity to the GABA A receptors and the affinity at GABA B receptors allow modulation and blocked impulse between nerve cells, reducing anxiety and promoting a calming effect. The nerve cell can be activated when the body does not have sufficient stimulation at the GABA receptors. When this occurs, existing conditions can worsen. For example, low level of GABA correlate with seizure disorders, mood disorders, anxiety, Parkinson's disease, and more. Some medications influence GABA levels to provide relaxation, pain relief, reduce anxiety and stress, lower blood pressure, and improve sleep. For example, GABA modulating drugs like barbiturates, anti-seizure medications, anesthetics, anticonvulsants, and benzodiazepines influence GABA activity and modulate GABA signaling. Gabapentin is another medication that increases GABA and is used to treat neuropathic pain, seizures, and muscle pain. The amino acid is also found naturally in green and black tea and fermented foods. So what does GABA do? Whereas an excitatory neurotransmitter will encourage nerve action potentials, an inhibitory neurotransmitter like GABA will inhibit neurons and make them less likely to fire and lessen the relevant activity in the central nervous system. When an action potential arrives at the axion terminal of the GABAergic neuron, GABA release into the synaptic cleft. The GABA binds to the postsynaptic receptors, which open chloride ion channels. The action at the GABA receptors is a rush of negatively charged chloride ions into the receiving neuron that becomes more negative inside the cell membrane. This means that it will be much less likely to fire an action potential. All of this occurs within milliseconds, but the GABA will slowly unbind to the receptor so that the calmness lasts. However, this calming effect is only apparent with GABA in the brain. In the spinal cord, the process influences sensory information integration. In turn, this helps with smooth muscle movements. GABA also plays a role in the immune and endocrine system and regulates the appetite, metabolism, complete gut health, and gastrointestinal function. It even helps to manage hormone levels and balance. Without sufficient GABA, the central nervous system remains active, which keeps us awake, or at the very least disrupts our REM sleep pattern. In addition, many people have trouble sleeping because of racing thoughts or anxiety, and this neurotransmitter can also reduce these symptoms to help you fall asleep faster. GABA will also keep you asleep during the night so that you do not toss and turn or wake up after every sleep cycle. The effect of the GABA allows us to reduce stress without intoxication or reduce cognitive function, since it is a natural neurotransmitter. It also acts with other neurotransmitters to keep stress in check while managing other mental, physical functions and processes. Studies indicate increasing GABA can lower anxiety and help to promote adequate relaxation. This is especially true when there is an optimal balance of GABA working alongside other neurotransmitters. With insufficient GABA, our bodies are on edge constantly, never giving us time to relax or de-stress. This is a worse combination for those who have anxiety disorders that can lead to more symptoms like insomnia, rapid heart rate, difficulty breathing, and more. GABA also helps with resilience to anxiety and stress. When we have enough, our neurons will not become overactive and cause us to have negative physical ailments and often coincide with anxiety and depression. Increasing GABA activity can help benefit our overall mental and physical health by eliminating harmful, stressful thought processes and the symptoms that come with these feelings. While it is not traditional type of nootropic, research suggests that GABA synthesis is associated with cognition and can improve mental status and performance. There are a few reasons behind this benefit of GABA activity. Some of the cognitive benefits are direct, while others are indirect effects of chemical messengers. When we are stressed out, especially for long periods, we can become tired and easily distracted from mental tasks. In the long term, this can lead to burnout and other negative effects on cognition. Muscimol is an ionotropic GABA receptor antagonist. So, muscimol, a psychoactive isoaxole from Amanita muscaria and related mushrooms, has proved to be a remarkably selective antagonist at ionotropic receptors for the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA. This historic overview highlights the discovery and development of muscimol and related compounds as a GABA agonist by Danish and Australian neurochemists. Muscimol is widely used as a ligand to probe GABA receptors and was the lead compound in the development of a range of GABAergic agents, including nipocatic acid, tiagabine, 4,5,6,7 tetrahydroxazole, priodine, 3-OL, and gaboxodol. Effects of EMR, or electromagnetic radiation, on inhibitory amino acid neurotransmitters. GABA and glycine are the main inhibitory neurotransmitters in the brain, and GABA is an important neurotransmitter for approximately 50% of the synaptic sites in the central nervous system. GABA plays a critical role in the cerebral cortex, hippocampus, thalamus, basal ganglia, and cerebellum, and has a regulatory role in various functions of the body, such as the regulation of emotion, memory, and sleep, anti-hypertension, anti-fatigue, analgesia, etc. GABA is produced in nerve endings catalyzed by glutamate decarboxylase. After release from the presynaptic membrane, most GABA diffuses to the postsynaptic membrane, causing an inhibitory effect in the postsynaptic membrane. The presynaptic membrane and glial cells reuptake a few GABA molecules, which are converted into succinic semi-formaldehyde in mitochondria, and then convert into succinic acid, which participates in the tricarboxylic acid cycle and provides a small part to the energy for glial cells and neural terminals. Quiel et al. Exposed Wister rats to microwave radiation with an average power density of 30 milliwatts centimeter squared for 5 minutes. Then HPLC was used to determine the GABA content released by hippocampal synaptosomes 6 hours after exposure. The results showed that the amount of GABA released by the hippocampal synaptosomes significantly decreased after radiation exposure. Zhang et al. Investigated the effects of EMR exposure on the emotional behavior and spatial memory of adolescent male mice with frequency of 1.8 gigahertz and time duration of 4 weeks. The authors found that the level of GABA and aspartic acid in the cortex and hippocampus significantly decreased after EMR exposure. These results suggest that EMR can reduce GABA neurotransmission. Wang et al. Exposed 80 Wister rats to a 2.856 gigahertz pulse microwave radiation at a power density of 50 MW centimeters squared for 6 minutes. The contents of amino acid neurotransmitters in the hippocampus were detected at 1, 3, 6, 9, 12, and 18 months after microwave exposure. The results showed that the glutamate to GABA ratio significantly decreased at 6 months after exposure. Nor et al. Investigated the effect of 1 hour daily exposure to EMR on the level of amino acid neurotransmitters in the midbrain, cerebellum, and medulla of adult male albino rats. The assessment of amino acid levels was applied after 1 hour, 1, 2, and 4 months of radiation exposure. A significant glycine increase in the midbrain was observed after 1 month, followed by a significant increase in GABA after 4 months. These results further suggest that microwave radiation may affect the neuroregulatory function of GABA, resulting in an imbalance in the excitation and inhibition in the central nervous system. So, what's really interesting is they've been telling people for years now that they have a chemical imbalance in their brain and that they need to take antidepressants to fix this imbalance. And here they're telling us that electromagnetic frequencies can actually cause an imbalance in the chemical receptors of the brain. In the central nervous system, GABA acts as an inhibitory transmitter. In one study, primary cultured rat cortical neurons were exposed to 900 megahertz microwave radiation with an average power density of 6 MW and centimeters squared and SAR value of 2.23 W/kg or kilograms. As a result, the expression of neuronal GABA receptor proteins was significantly upregulated. Few studies have reported the effects of EMR on GABA receptors. Further investigation to clarify the role of GABA and its receptors during EMR exposure is necessary in the future. Overall, the above studies suggest that EMR can cause metabolic disorders in the inhibitory neurotransmitters GABA and glycine, which may lead to neuronal dysfunction by affecting the neuronal excitation, inhibition, and balance. So in this article, Frontiers in Public Health, Effects of Radio Frequency Electromagnetic Radiation on Neurotransmitters in the Brain. Just going into this to show that not only can the sacred plants like Amanita muscaria or cannabis, the cannabinoids, some people use ayahuasca, which affect people to have these shamanic experiences. We have neurotransmitters in our brain that these particular plant chemicals affect on our mind. But what this article is telling us here is that Electromagnetic radiation can have an effect on these transmitters. So effects of EMR on dopamine. I'm not going to read them all. Effects of EMR on norepinephrine and epinephrine. Sorry about the pronunciation. Effects of EMR on serotonin. Effects of EMR on excitatory amino acid neurotransmitters. By being exposed to chemicals or taking chemicals via our food or sacred plants, herbs, we're affecting these chemical reactions within our brain, but also electromagnetic radiation can have an effect on those transmitters in our brain. Effect of EMR on peptides and other neurotransmitters. Opioid peptides including endorphins. So we have opioid receptors. Our brains have all these receptors. If we look at the 5G spectrum, here it's frequencies, everything you need to know. So wavelength is inversely proportional to frequency, i.e. high frequencies have shorter wavelengths. For example, 30 hertz, low frequencies, has a wavelength of 10,000 kilometers over 6,000 miles, while 300 gigahertz high frequency is just 1 millimeter. When a wavelength is really short, such as the frequencies at the higher end of the spectrum, the waveform is so tiny that it can become easily distorted. This is why really high frequencies can't travel as far as lower ones. So this is why they've got so many 5G towers. So there's some of the 5G carriers. So T-Mobile use low band spectrum 600 megahertz as well as 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. The Verizon, the 5G ultra wideband network uses millimeter waves, specifically 28 gigahertz and 39 gigahertz. So these levels of gigahertz were within the same tests that the rats were given, and which decreased their GABA receptors. Now, as we read before, if we have low GABA levels, it can cause all kinds of things like insomnia, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. Can electromagnetic waves affect emotions? The answer to this month's question, can electromagnetic waves affect emotions, is yes. Whenever there are electromagnetic EM waves basically everywhere, there is a potential for them to directly or indirectly to affect the emotions. But what about the likely motivation behind the originally posed question? Can EM waves affect your body directly by altering brain function and nerve impulses? Again, the answer is yes. There have been studies that indicate that EM waves applied to the brain can relieve depression, but not all of the effects of EM waves on the nervous system can be positive. Extremely intensive EM waves can potentially kill someone, definitely an effect on emotions. The alarming ways EMFs are changing your brain. Here are some of the known mechanisms by which EMF affect the brain. The blood-brain barrier is a group of specialized cells that acts as a filter to keep the brain safe from toxins, heavy metal, pathogen, drugs, and other foreign substances. Many neurological diseases are linked to a compromised blood-brain barrier, including meningitis, Alzheimer's, and multiple sclerosis. EMF increased permeability of the brain-blood barrier, making it leaky and allowing things like mercury, aluminium, and viruses to more readily enter the brain. Long-term EMF exposures leads to chronically increased level of free radicals. Free radicals are unattached oxygen molecules that attack cells much in the same way they cause metal to rust. The brain is highly susceptible to free radical damage because it's a heavy oxygen user, using 20% of the body's total. Free radicals cause brain cell damage and aging down to the level of your DNA. Brain cells communicate with each other via chemicals known as neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters regulate mood, sleep, motivation, ability to learn, addictions, and more. Long-term exposure to EMFs alter the expression of 143 proteins in the brain. EMFs cause a significant disruption in levels of serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, causing adverse effects on mood, memory, learning, and stress. Another way EMF disrupts brain cell communication is by rupturing brain cell membranes. This causes them to leak calcium ions needed for communication between brain cells. Dr. Andrew Goldsworthy of the Imperial College of London believes that an increase in accidents among cell phone users has less to do with distraction than with delayed reactions caused by the flood of calcium ions into the brain cell. The Journal of the American Medical Association found that 15 minutes spent on a cell phone disrupts brain glucose metabolism. This is important since the brain uses glucose as its main source of energy. Some experts believe that Alzheimer's disease may occur when areas of the brain can no longer utilize glucose to feed brain cells. These parts of the brain have become insulin resistant, leading some experts to consider Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Living within 150 feet of high voltage power is crossed out, but it says increase the risk of dementia by 24%. Sleep is a critical pillar of good brain health. It's during sleep that your brain consolidates memories, repairs itself, and clears itself of metabolic debris. Dozens of studies show that low-level EMF exposure disrupts your natural production of melatonin. Melatonin is most commonly known as a natural sleep hormone that regulates circadian rhythm. But it does more than that. It's also a potent antioxidant, which has been found to aid in the prevention of Alzheimer's, depression, cardiovascular disease, insomnia, mood disorders, tinnitus, and various cancers. EMF exposure affects the structure and function of the thyroid. EMFs elevate levels of thyroid-stimulating hormones, TSH. High levels of TSH are directly linked to hypothyroidism. Common symptoms of hypothyroidism include memory loss, depression, brain fog, fatigue, sensitivity to cold, dry skin, constipation, weight gain, and muscle aches. One of the most unexpected findings has been that seamstresses have a fourfold increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. According to researchers done at the University of Southern California, seamstresses seem to be among the individuals with the highest occupational EMF exposure. They sit near motors of sewing machines for hours, and most industrial sewing machines are always on and always produce magnetic fields. This illustrates that it's not only high-tech devices that emit substantial amounts of EMFs. The science of vibration, how different frequencies affect our brainwaves. The brain and consciousness are inextricably linked, meaning that shifts in one of these aspects of the self produce corresponding shifts in others. This is in large part because consciousness is not restricted to existing only in physical form and is in fact a non-local field of energy, which means that the brain is simply an organ which interfaces the mind with physical reality. To draw an analogy, it is a translator of physical sensation and other experiential phenomenon from the body to the mind and from the mind to the body. The brain allows the mind to control and move through the body, but the mind exists as an energetic field independently of the brain, which is why scientists have never been able to pinpoint consciousness to any specific part of the brain or to the brain itself, because it does not arise from the brain. Metaphorically speaking, the brain is simply a tool that the non-local mind causes to interface with the experience of physical reality. Effective brainwave patterns on consciousness and experience of reality. The brain operates largely through electrical signals sent between approximately 100 million neurons, nerve cells spread out across different regions. So, as we've seen with these neurons are affected by chemical reactions from foods or things we ingest, but they're also affected by the electromagnetic signals in the environment. The firing of these neurons happens rapidly and creates wave-like rhythms of activation and rest, which can be measured by sensitive machinery. The rate at which the neurons fire and the synchronicity between the firing generates varying wave frequencies, which scientists have mapped, categorized, and correlated to different states of consciousness as follows. In the alpha wave state, you'll most likely feel awake, but also simultaneously quite relaxed and without a loss of brain function like you would if you were very tired. When you get up in the morning and just before you fall asleep, you are naturally in this state. It's interesting to note that when you close your eyes, your brain naturally starts producing more alpha waves. However, there are varying degrees of the alpha wave state. When you really drop in deep It's far more powerful and profound than what you might feel or experience just from closing your eyes. Deep alpha wave states are frequently seen in and experienced by meditators. Alpha activity also heightens your imagination, visualization, memory, learning, and concentration, and is correlated with the decrease in stress and anxiety. Beta wave is 12 Hz to 27 Hz. In the beta state, you are essentially wide awake. Beta waves are associated with normal waking consciousness and a heightened state of alertness, logic, and critical reasoning. This is the dominant mental state most people are in during the day and the majority of their waking lives. Although this state tends to be uneventful, don't underestimate its importance. Many people who lack sufficient beta activity may experience mental or emotional disorders such as depression or ADHD and low SMR production. A sub-range of beta at 12 to 15 Hz may be related to insomnia. While beta waves are important for effective function throughout the day, they also can translate into stress, anxiety, and restlessness. The voice of beta can be described as being that nagging little inner critic that gets louder and higher you go into the range. On the other hand, simulating beta waves in underactive individuals can improve energy levels, concentration, attentiveness, and emotional stability. However, most people notice more benefit from shifting their brainwaves into other less frequently experienced states such as alpha, delta, theta, and gamma. Delta is the slowest band of brainwaves and is experienced in deep stage 4 dreamless sleep. When your brain is in a full delta wave state, your body is healing and repairing itself and resetting its internal clocks. You don't actually dream in this state and are more or less completely unconscious. Delta has also been seen in a very deep state of meditation as well. Gamma waves, 27 Hz and up. The gamma wave state is associated with expanded awareness, creativity, activation of the pineal gland, heightened intuition, enhanced mental clarity and focus, deep feelings of peace, joy, and oneness, formation of ideas, language, and memory processing, and various types of learning. As such, this is generally a highly desirable state to be in. Unsurprisingly, gamma waves have been identified as a characteristic brainwave pattern of regular meditators and monks, and are present when we are dreaming, although they can arise in normal waking consciousness as well. However, research has shown that by practicing forms of meditation and mindfulness regularly, you can literally rewire your brain to explore gamma waves more frequently. Theta waves, which are 3 Hz to 8 Hz. Theta brainwaves are present during deep meditation, relaxation, and light sleep, including the dream state. Theta has been shown to be very receptive brainwave state that has proven useful for hypnotherapy, as well as hypnosis using recorded affirmations and suggestions. They are also strongly correlated with bursts of creativity, inspiration, and vivid daydreams and visualization. According to brainwave experts, it is at the alpha theta border from 7 Hz to 8 Hz where the optimal range of visualization, mind programming, and using creative power of your mind begins. Clearly, there are great benefits to be had by shifting your brainwaves into highly specific states, allowing your consciousness to experience reality through different lenses that help it focus in positive, expansive, and oftentimes deeply healing ways. So what's interesting is that we have these different brain wave phases that affect our emotions and our neurotransmitters, and also that I'm just wondering, if using these EMF waves, that can they dial in to our brain certain actions, especially using the graphene in the brain to control us to think certain ways and to feel certain ways. So what's interesting is that the Earth has a frequency too, which is the Schumann resonance, and it's at 7.83 Hertz. So what is the Earth's frequency exactly? Basically, it's an overall average pulse rate that exists in the space between the Earth and the inner edge of the Earth's ionosphere, more than 30 miles up from the Earth's surface because the Earth's surface has a negative charge and the ionosphere is positively charged. This cavity is filled with an electrical tension in the form of lightning strikes. It is these strikes occurring every moment around the world that creates electromagnetic waves, and these waves have an average frequency of 7.83 Hertz, right at the juncture of the alpha and the theta. Modern means of communication like cell phones, TV, radio all use radio waves to transmit, and radio waves use the ionosphere electromagnetic field to travel speedily and uninterruptedly. When we tune into a radio station, we are matching our radio's frequency or resonance to the frequency of the radio station. So it seems that the frequency of 7.83 Hertz, give or take a little at times due to weather phenomena, has been the Earth's radio station, so to speak, for all the time we've been on Earth. This has led to at least one researcher theorizing that the Earth's frequency, also called the Schumann resonance, named after German physicist Winfried Otto Schumann, who predicted it mathematically in 1952, has actually played a huge role in the evolution of human brainwave activity over the millennia. What happens when we're out of sync with the Earth's frequency? Some interesting research involving an experiment with people living in underground bunkers shows that when people are removed from the vibrations of the Schumann resonance, they exhibit all sorts of negative physical symptoms like increased stress, anxiety, insomnia, depression, and other health problems. When the Schumann resonance is reintroduced to these same people in their underground dwelling place, the symptoms reverse, indicating that this resonance promotes healing and vitality. Years ago, when researchers did a lot of studies on transcendental meditation, they also found that when a particular mantra was repeated evenly, this evoked brain waves in the mediators right around the alpha theta 7 Hertz to 8 Hertz border, and they correlated these brainwaves with the accelerated ego development and various types of inner healing. So I'm just wondering if the Earth always had this 7.83 Hertz resonance, or had it been a different resonance in the past, which maybe is the reason why we physically changed and possibly gave the ancient people the ability to have telepathy or other phenomena that we no longer have the ability to use. And perhaps this was a antediluvian trait with the skulls that we have, elongated skulls, giants, and can they tune those resonances in to benefit their agendas using these towers or radio waves? So I'm just going to show a video from Peter Mungo Jupp, who often speaks on the Thunderbirds project from the Electric Universe. And it's interesting to show that the cosmic lightning that the Thunderbirds project talk about may cause instantaneous changing of the species. If the Schumann resonance is related to lightning and weather upon the Earth, between the Earth and the ionosphere, what would happen to the Earth if we have these cosmic lightning events within our atmosphere, and how would it change humans? And is this related to the Tower of Babel? Is this what actually changed humans at the time of the Tower of Babel and separated us? Not only the Tower of Babel, but also at the time of the flood, there were great earth changes that it appears that humans have decreased in their abilities. Not only were humans a lot taller, they were mainly plant-based before the flood. After the flood, God told Noah to eat meats, and it seems that our bodies have degenerated in some way and lost the ability to live longer and healthier. And even at the time of Adam and Eve, it's possible that this has happened in increments over time, or possible resets, where mankind is degenerating, not becoming smarter or better, but having less abilities. This is a video from the Thunderbolts project on the Electric Universe. Speaker they have on is Peter Mungo Jupp, and he's talking about how species have changed. I guess science likes to use the word evolved, but that it's not a millions of years event. It's an instantaneous event that can happen within one generation.
Hi, I'm Peter Mungo Jupp. Now, the world's a hotbed of archaeological mystery, and perhaps one of the greatest ones is Australia's Murray-Darling River system. It stretches across a lot of the continent, but attached to it is a system of sand dune lunettes. They're round and they're up to 100 metres high, and in one of them in particular, Lake Victoria, have buried the bodies of up to 15,000 Aborigines. Now, most archaeologists believe it's a burial ground that extended across thousands of years. I believe it's the aftermath of a vast geophysical destruction, and it happened very quickly. But what caused it, and when did it occur? Come with me, we're going to find out. Southeastern Australia, down to the Murray-Darling River system and Lake Victoria, that huge lunette. But across the beach was revealed a carpet of bones, partially buried and fossilised. They spread over many, many kilometres. Aboriginal mythology and tradition is all about cosmological warfare in the plasma of space. Comets are mentioned, meteorites falling from the heavens and killing people, planets disturbed in their motion, tsunamis sweeping across the land, huge hurricanes, huge destructive thunderbolts from the god, plasma formations in the sky, mountain building, river building, all recorded in oral traditions, handed down impeccably from generation to generation. And this is where the white myth interpreters get it very badly wrong. To the Aboriginal people, these events actually happened. They're not representations, they're not symbolic, they actually occurred. Alkara the wise man told the Barkinji that soon something very dangerous would happen. They had to move. They could see the sky was lit up, but there was no moon. They were terribly scared. Then they heard this rumbling noise from the sky, like thunder. And as it came down close, there were red streaks, and a great big ball of fire came down, and there was smoke. And where it fell, many of them died. Many got burnt because there was fire within its belly. Here we are in Australia at Lake Mungo. We're at the centre of a bitter archaeological controversy, and it's all about these bones. Are they the same as the modern indigenous people, or are they from a totally different race? This is where the controversy began. There was a dramatic event to explain all this extinction. It was the Lake Mungo magnetic reversal.
We do have very strong evidence now from research being done in modern plasma physics that around the world were witnessed auroras which were thousands of times more powerful than present-day aurora. Amongst the early Aboriginal tribes, great fear was held of the Southern Lights, or Aurora Australis. The Ngango close to Canberra thought it signified that at some great distance a number of blacks were being slaughtered. The Kuanai of the Gippsland region would shout such words as "send it away, do not let it burn us up." The shapes that they carved into the rock resembled the shapes you're seeing in these plasma discharges in laboratories. Yes, and the interesting thing is that as this high energy discharge takes place in the laboratory, the shape changes over time.
Right.
Very quickly in the laboratory, but if you consider something on the scale of the Earth or an aurora, it takes place over a more extended period of time.
You believe it carves out these craters, and you have some evidence of that sort of effect?
Yes, well, one of the features of electrical scarring is that it can form either sinuous patterns or it can form circular craters.
So what caused this magnetic reversal at Lake Mungo? Was it a comet, a mass coronal ejection, or perhaps a chaotic solar system? I talked to Ted Bryan from Wollongong University, and he had some very interesting information on Rick Firestone's theories on the demise of the Clovis Indian and the megafauna in North America. Is there some parallels with Lake Mungo and Lake Victoria?
Firestone believes that a large one came in and hit the Laurentian ice sheet, but he can find across North America it wiped out the Clovis Indian culture, which was developed at the time. It just terminated.
Yeah.
And he thinks it wiped it out. He also finds other physical evidence. He finds this, what he calls a black mat.
What's this carbonaceous material you mentioned? What sort of stuff is it roughly?
It's a black clay with what I would know as rotting down vegetable matter.
Precisely at the termination of the Clovis Indian culture and the extinction of the megafauna, the Carolina Bays lunette system was formed in North America. This is very similar to the Murray-Darling lunette system. Some catastrophic event occurred at this carbonaceous layer. Is it the same event that caused the formation of the sand dune lunettes, the death of the megafauna, and the extermination of so many Aborigines? We don't know. But very few, apart from Rick Firestone and Ted Bryan, have explained this sort of phenomena that exists in Australia. Darwin's theory of slow evolution by natural selection is no longer viable. Instead, catastrophic evolution occurs. We see the sudden and total death of megafauna such as the mammoth or the giant kangaroos suddenly being supplanted by smaller species. I believe this is an adaptation of the DNA to new electromagnetic environments. Small kangaroos take over from large kangaroos, and all of a sudden a new species has evolved. Under the influence of an extreme coronal mass ejection, a comet, a meteor, a planet in disturbed motion, or even an exploding nebula from outside the solar system, the electromagnetic spectrum reverts to chaos. It forms a new harmonic. The DNA instantly reacts to this extreme provocation. It intelligently but miraculously adapts to this spectrum of extreme celestial chaos. In a process called polyploidy, if the provocation is extreme enough, the DNA instantly creates a new species. Darwin got it wrong. It's not natural selection, it's the intelligent process of polyploidy that creates new species. This means that the megafauna's extinction was followed by the creation of new Australian fauna. It could also explain the divergence of the Australian Aborigine. We need to re-examine our ideas on archaeology and take into account these destructions which I am sure have occurred to the Aboriginal nation as well.
So if species can instantly change via space, plasma, energy, photons, can they manipulate us and change us via human-created microwaves? And could the Tower of Babel be talking about some kind of technology that has the ability to change people, to unite them under one man's agenda, one group's agenda, using microwave technology, because our cells are reading antenna for frequencies using these harp technologies. So we have this image here of the Freemasons' Jacob's Ladder, and we have the two pillars, one from the Temple of Solomon. As we know from the Bible, the body is the temple. We have the pillar of Jacob and Boaz, and basically the pillars are the two strands of the DNA, or the ladder represents the DNA. On one side we have the sun symbol, the solar symbol. The other side we have the moon and stars. And in the middle we have the all-seeing eye and what seems like a star. And I would say that this represents Venus. After researching the rosette and the winged disc, also it representing the planet Venus, which represents the woman. So in the Bible we have the woman with the sun, clothed in the sun, and the moon at her feet, and the stars around as a crown. This comes from the story of Joseph with his dream also. According to the Freemasons website, Jacob's ladder appears for the first time in Jacob's dream, Genesis 28. This passage is found during Jacob's journey from Beersheba. Jacob left Beersheba and headed towards Haran. He lighted on the spot and stayed there until the sunset. So he had a dream. The Lord appeared beside him and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father God of Isaac. The land that thou hast lied, I will give it to thee and thy seed, and thy seed will be like the dust of the earth. Thou shalt spread to the west, the east, the north, and the south. All the families of the earth will be blessed if they have faith in you and in thy seed. In ancient origins, Stairway to Heaven, the story of Jacob's ladder, which proposes that the ladder may be read as a means to achieve spiritual elevation or ascension. In this case, the angels have been interpreted variously as representing of reincarnation, ascending and descending of our bodies' souls, or human souls rising in virtue or falling in sin. With this interpretation, could performing virtuous acts be seen as a way to ascend Jacob's ladder? With so many possibilities, Jacob's ladder can be seen as a tool to teach various moral lessons, but the true meaning may be something far beyond current human understanding. The Tower of Babel, Jacob's ladder, and Jesus. Ed Clowney again gives us a great reflection upon the meaning of the two towers, as it were, in his book The Unfolding Mystery, First the Tower of Babel. We do not know, of course, whether the Tower of Babel was designed in the ziggurat pattern. Did the proud builders of Babel seek to establish communication between heaven and earth on their own terms? The later ziggurat at Lhasa was called the House of the Link between Heaven and Earth. In any case, we are told that the builders of Babel planned a tower that would reach to heaven. That same phrase describes the stairway of Jacob's dream. Man's tower could not reach heaven. The early Russian cosmonaut did not reach it either when they reported from their rocket that space was empty. God did come down on the Tower of Babel, but not to sanctify man's presumption. He came down to judge the earth and to disrupt the proud unity of mankind, a unity that threatened to lock humanity under totalitarian darkness. The Stairway Tower of Jacob's dream was God's answer to the Tower of Babel. The top of it did reach to heaven, for God was the builder, not man. God alone establishes communication between heaven and earth. True religion does not come from man's quest, but from God's intervention. Rebellious mankind has not sought the Lord. People seek after their own imaginations. A penetrating question cuts through all man's idolatries. What have you done with God? Finally, he brings the foreshadowing to light in the person of Jesus. Jesus referred to Jacob's dream when Nathanael came to him at the beginning of his ministry. Nathanael was brought to Jesus by Philip. As he approached Jesus, said, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. John 1:47, since Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, was notable for for guile as the deceiver of his father, it would seem that Jesus was comparing Nathanael favorably with his ancient ancestor. Nathanael was amazed. "How do you know me?" he asked. "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael's response to this statement seems extraordinary. "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." We must suppose that Nathanael had his reasons for remembering that time under the fig tree. He sensed that Jesus knew him indeed in the innermost thoughts of his heart. Jesus welcomed Nathanael's faith and promised that he would see great things. Addressing Nathanael and the others, Jesus said, "I tell you truth. You shall see heaven open and angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." John 1:51. Jesus promised a revelation that would far surpass Jacob's dream. The stairway of Jacob's dream was a symbol of the communication that God provides between heaven and earth. By that stairway, angels can go up to heaven from God's presence on earth and come down to earth from God's dwelling in heaven. The stairway was a picture of Jacob's dream, but what the dream promised became a reality in Christ's incarnation. God came down in the person of his Son to dwell on earth. Christ is the link between earth and heaven. He is the true Bethel, the house of God, Emmanuel, God with us. Jacob anointed a stone with oil to memorialize the presence of God and called the stone the house of God. But God anointed his only Son with the Spirit. It follows for us that we should respond like Jacob and worship God where he came down, not in a physical place, but in a physical person, Jesus Christ. And if we go to John 10 verse 1, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door or climbs up some other way, same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers." Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. So I originally saw this information on the Autodidactic channel, and he was talking about red bricks being able to store energy. And we have these bricks here that red bricks can store energy just like batteries. Advantageously, a brick wall serving as a supercapacitor can be recharged hundreds of thousands of times within an hour. If you connect a couple of bricks, a microelectronic sensors would be easily powered. It's possible to convert red bricks, some of the world's cheapest and most familiar building materials, into energy storage units that can be charged to hold electricity like a battery, a new study shows. The researchers have developed a method to make or modify smart bricks that can store energy until required for powering devices. The method converts bricks into a type of energy storage device called a supercapacitor. Our method works with regular bricks or recycled bricks, and we can make our own bricks as well, says Julio Darcy, assistant professor of chemistry. As a matter of fact, the work that we have published in Nature Communications stems from bricks that we bought at Home Depot right here in Brentwood, Missouri. Each brick was 65 cents. Proof of concept study shows a brick directly powering a green LED light. So the idea that bricks can store energy and be used to store energy, or a building can be used to store energy. In Genesis 11 verse 3, they said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to heaven." So they specifically use brick instead of stone.
Vikram, give us a sense of how this technology will work in EV batteries.
Yeah. So we take coal tar, which is a complete waste of the steel plant, and we convert it into something called bulk meso coke, where we have a patented furnace design where we're able to align the carbon elements that lead to a better performance in the material later on. So we make bulk meso coke and then we graphitize it, and that's where carbon becomes graphite, in the anode of the cells. So this is where the technology lies of how you configure the carbon elements to get a better performance of the cell itself. So if you're talking longer range, faster charging, all this happens at this stage of development of the precursor material.
So basically what they're saying is that the graphite derived from the coal tar pitch is used to make an anode for lithium-ion batteries, which is an interesting connection with the bricks of the Tower of Babel that were put together with mortar of tar pitch rather than regular mortar of lime or the conventional mortar that we use today. The four fundamental frequencies of universal oscillation and their harmonic connection to the resonant tones of the Great Pyramids of Giza and the basis of DNA. The reason harmonic alignment works at all is because there are certain frequencies for which the universe seems to have been pre-designed. And these frequencies are harmonics of four fundamental frequencies of universal oscillation. They are the frequencies responsible for the four pathways to light and truth, and are guiding forces for everything we've studied in this work. Whether they are manifested in the physical realm as the four forces in nature, the four seasons, the four energy fields and ancient elements, the four philosophical functions, the four noble truths, or the four whatever, they all have their origin in the four frequencies of God. A fascinating book was written by Christopher Dunn on his research into the technologies of ancient Egypt hidden among the mysteries of the Great Pyramid, called the Giza Power Plant. It includes Chris's own discoveries as well as some earlier research. A quote from Boris said a member of the Tom Delaney team, which did acoustic analysis within the King's Chamber, is illuminating. Subsequent experiments conducted by Tom Delaney in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid and in chambers above the King's Chamber suggest that the pyramid was constructed with a sonic purpose. Delaney identifies four resonant frequencies, or notes, that are enhanced by the structure of the pyramid and by the materials used in its construction. The notes from an F-sharp chord. Delaney's test shows that these frequencies are present in the King's Chamber even when no sounds are being produced. They are there in frequencies that range from 16 Hz to down to half Hz, well below the range of human hearing. According to Delaney, these vibrations are caused by the wind blowing across the end of the so-called shafts, in the same way as sounds are created when one blows across the top of a bottle. So the Great Pyramid of Giza was built with the principle of harmonic alignment in mind, and its frequencies are subsonic, all the way down to half a hertz. There is no doubt in my mind how that could have served to harmonically couple the pyramid to the universe's and the Earth's sonic glue. Now, I don't mean to imply that every replica Rolex GMT Master Eye celestial body in the universe is tuned to F sharp. Specifically, frequencies are relative to the body involved. Only the principle of harmonic alignment is absolute throughout the universe, but F sharp is the resonant chord for the Earth, a fact apparently intrinsic to the ancient wisdom in a diversity of cultures. Including the program is a meeting with Native American maker of sacred flutes from Oregon. His flutes, which are made to serenade Mother Earth, are tuned to the key of F sharp. And this is F sharp. And if we go to the Masaru Emoto video, we will see that it's the five-sided pyramid that makes a resonance sound compared to other shapes that don't continue to resonate. So it's specific shapes, and it's interesting that the Egyptians chose a five-sided pyramid to build their pyramid shape with
each other. I will now tell you why a water crystal possesses an optimal shape for resonance to occur. This object is made out of 99.999% crystal. It is the shape of a five-sided pyramid.
非常に、伝導が高い。
It resonates at a very high conductive frequency, and its small size creates a high octave note.
電動 electrical frequency is very high.
Conductivity something.
Conductivity.
で、これはちょっと
This pyramid is the very same shape and note, but it is larger in size.
これは低くなる。
The larger size resonates at a lower octave of the same note.
そしてこれは大きい。
This is the biggest shape of the same note.
さらに低くなる。
Once again, it is a lower octave.
でも共鳴、コンダクティビティの共鳴はいい。
Still, it's resonating.
同じ材質の
Here is a shape made from the same crystal material. Its shape is different from that of the five-sided pyramid. This one only had four sides.
その小さい声出すじゃない。
You can hear there is no resonant frequencies occurring in this structure.
で、共鳴しない。
Doesn't resonate.
No conductor.
Here is a six-sided cube made from the same material. Once again, there is no conductivity in this shape.
In 1988, the author and biologist Dr. David Dreamer collaborated on a science art project which consisted of measuring the vibrational frequencies of our 4 DNA-based molecules, translating them into sound, programming them into a Yamaha synthesizer, and using this tuning system as the basis for original compositions entitled Sequentia 1990 and 94 CD. The realization of biological infrared frequencies into sound has resulted in unusual insight into the harmonic fabric of DNA, and reactions from listeners suggest that our bodies may have a way of recognizing their own electromagnetic patterns through the resonance of tone. One significant constant with this project required that rather than mapping or assigning arbitrary pitches to hear patterns, the actual vibrational frequencies were to be collected directly from the molecular realm. These frequencies would be ranged as scales of tones and used as the basis for musical composition. There are about 3 billion base pairs in the DNA of each human cell. If they were strung out, they would measure about 3 feet long, yet each of these bases remains absolutely consistent in its chemical makeup. The 4 DNA bases, adenine, cortisone, guanine, and thymine, consist each of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, whose bonds bend, stretch, and rock upon absorbing infrared light with a specific frequency related to the energy and strength of the bond and the mass of the nucleus of the atom. The tuning system for Sequentia was derived directly from the laboratory chemistry of the 4 bases and had nothing to do with a particular gene or configuration of bases along a helix. And remember, I was talking about the chemical structure of the sacred plants and using frequencies to have a similar effect or the opposite or negative effect. The basis of DNA and RNA have certain resonances frequencies related to the absorption of infrared light. This is a common property of all organic molecules, and in fact, infrared spectra are used as a primary diagnostic characteristic in analytical procedures. As the light is passed through the sample, it is absorbed by the sample at specific frequencies, and the instrument plots the absorption band as a spectrum. The problem of getting the frequencies within hearing range can be solved by recognizing that any Hertz number derived in half or double will produce its corresponding lower and upper octave. After weeks and weeks of experimenting with different sounds combinations on the synthesizer, a tonal center began to emerge. One pitch seemed to draw other pitches to it, to lend coherency to the mass. This pitch turned out to be a kind of C-sharp common to all the basses. This C-sharp seems to act as a balancer for the entire spectrum of frequencies. The pitch which shows up the most frequently and ought to have asserted itself as a tonic or tonal center is F-sharp. It is found no less than 3 times in each bass collection, but instead it is its fifth, the C-sharp, which acts as the organizing force. And that word tonic is interesting. I'm going to look into this. And the word tonic water, the definition is an agent such as a drug that increases body tone, one that invigorates, restores, refreshes, or stimulates. A liquid preparation for the scalp or hair, chiefly New England, a carbonated flavored beverage. The first tone of a major or minor scale, and a voiced sound. So the word tonic can be used in a preparation that's used for health and restoration of the body, but it can also be used as a tone or major music scale or a voice sound, which all ties in with the healing of vibration. And this is the music that was made via the project of the DNA and frequency. And it sounds a lot like wind chimes. And just on a tangent, I remember these musical stones. So the Great Pyramid experiment exploring infrasound technology used by the ancients. In part 1 of this article, we saw how there is compelling evidence to suggest that the ancient Egyptians of the Pyramid Age incorporated sound technology into the design of Giza's Great Pyramid. More extraordinarily still is the discovery that rock cut dead-end passage inside the structure, enigmatic subterranean chamber, might well have functioned as a sound resonance tube, generating infrasound with a base frequency in the range of 5 Hz. If this is correct, why was infrasound so important to the ancients, and can we find evidence of its usage among ancient cultures elsewhere in the world? What do we know about the effects of infrasound on human bodily system, and more specifically upon the human mind? The answer to these questions show us that the effects of infrasound might well have been known to our ancestors as early as the Upper Paleolithic age, some 45,000 years ago. It has long been known that infrasound affects the human brain in a number of different ways. It can induce feelings of nausea, anxiety, paranoia, as well as a sense of dread. In more sensitive individuals, this can lead to a feeling of disconnection with the material world, accompanied by a very real sense of otherworldliness. What's interesting is I have a side hobby of, for fun, learning about Sasquatch, and what we have here in Australia is the Yowie, and watching eyewitness accounts of people that say they've seen these creatures, and a lot of them say that they use infrasound, which makes them paralyzed. So large animals such as whales, elephants, rhinoceroses, hippopotamus, octopi, and giraffes use infrasound. Infrasound, a frequency below 20 Hz that humans cannot hear, but several species of animals can produce to react to this low sound. So in terms of Sasquatch, it has been suggested Sasquatch uses infrasound much like a tiger to stun their opposition or prey. This would explain many encounters in which the witness is frozen in time, unable to scream, take a photo, or pull the trigger of their gun, only to remain frozen while their minds try to make sense of what they are experiencing. Humans can only hear some of the sounds that tigers use to communicate, says von Mugenhaler. Humans can hear frequencies from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, but whales, elephants, rhinos, and tigers can produce sounds below 20 Hz. Could Sasquatch use this same ability? This low-pitched sound called infrasound can travel long distances, permitting buildings, cutting through dense forests, and even passing through mountains. The lower the frequency, the farther the distance the sound could travel. So experiments by the US military and others indicate that infrasound can have profound psychological and physical effects on humans and other animals. Humans exposed to various frequencies of infrasound have reported disorientation, nausea, fear, panic, sorrow, loss of bowels, drowsiness, visual hallucinations, chills, high blood pressure, increased blood flow, internal respiratory problems, and even organ damage. The US Navy reports that it is unsafe for humans to be exposed to infrasound at a level of 140 decibels. It is reported that infrasound can rupture organs and make objects explode, and it is a matter of history that there has been research into sonic weapons. Not all infrasound is damaging. In fact, you are surrounded by sources of infrasound. Some natural sources of infrasound are waterfalls, ocean waves, earthquakes, and atmospheric phenomena like thunder and lightning. Even audible sound waves can interfere with sounds of other frequencies and cause an infrasound interference wave. Most of those naturally occurring sources of infrasound emit noise that is of a very low level or loudness. Many animals use infrasound for various purposes. Elephants use infrasound to communicate over vast distances. Whales use infrasound to navigate the oceans. So it's also known that whales and dolphins use sound waves to catch fish, stun and catch fish. Tigers have infrasound frequencies in their roars that seem to serve to confuse or stun their prey as well. And I'm not saying that Sasquatch is real or not real. I enjoy listening to the stories, and I think there are a lot of eyewitness reports that definitely make this something to consider. And Sasquatch also reminds me a lot of the Epic of Gilgamesh story from ancient Mesopotamia. It talks about Enkidu, who is a great beast man that lives in the forest. Although there seems little question that infrasound can induce a shifted state of consciousness, there can be no obvious reason to assume that this is not a very real effect on the human brain. One can lead to genuine visionary experiences and psychic insights. If correct, then were the pyramid builders of ancient Egypt aware not only of some very expressive forms of sound technology, but also of the impact of infrasound on human bodily systems? Is this why the dead end passage in the subterranean chamber was deliberately designed to generate infrasound, and why other of its chambers produce it on a slightly lower level? Megalithic sound generation. Certainly there is compelling evidence that megalithic architecture dating to the Neolithic age was designed to generate infrasound. For instance, in a study of the 5,500-year-old West Kennet Long Barrow Monument in Wiltshire, England, British musician and archaeoacoustics expert Steve Marshall determined that its east-west aligned entrance corridor produced infrasound at a frequency of around 8 to 9 Hz. And this is the West Kennet Long Barrow. One test conducted with young enthusiastic initiate, a 14-year-old boy inside a Long Barrow central corridor, involved the monument's inherent ability to generate infrasound through the introduction of a miniature bass drum hit loudly with sticks by a skilled drummer locally intermediately outside the monument. According to Marshall, the boy later reported that with eyes open he could just make out the end stones of the west end chamber, which at first appeared to be moving slightly. On one stone of the back wall, a small black circle appeared, which grew in size. It took on the appearance of a passage leading to another chamber, which he thought he could see into. He then continued to listen with eyes closed and was convinced that on 2 occasions someone had joined him in the chamber, but he had been entirely alone. Marshall suspected that the youth's experience resulted from his exposure to infrasound, suggesting that the West Kennet Long Burrow might have been designed with the purpose in mind. He also determined that the monument's chambers resonate at either 84 Hz or 110 Hz, both well within the male vocal range. Intoning in the King's Chamber, similar results were obtained through intoning inside Great Pyramid's granite sarcophagus. Its principal resonating frequencies were shown to be between 65 Hz and 160 Hz, with the greatest spikes of activity between 114 Hz and 122 Hz. Since intoning seems to be a natural thing to do when lying down inside a sarcophagus, there is every reason to assume it was designed with the intention in mind. The average male vocal frequency ranging between 87 Hz and 180 Hz, with most female voices spanning the range between 165 Hz to 255 Hz. Indeed, the fundamental frequency of what is known as the complex speech tone for a typical male, known as pitch or FO, spans the range between 100 to 120 Hz, even though the female natural pitch is on average 1 octave higher. Since the sarcophagus's optimum resonant frequency range is 114 to 122 Hz, synchronizes near perfectly to the pitch of the male voice. It seems reasonable to suggest that it was designed with the male intoning range in mind. This then is yet further evidence that the pyramid builders possessed an advanced knowledge of sound technology. So instruments of infrasound, if the idea of utilizing sound in a cave or cave-like chamber for the purpose of inducing a sense of otherworldliness has been around since the Upper Paleolithic Age, chances are that knowledge of how to generate infrasound is equally as old. Most likely this was achieved using long tube-like instruments that mimic the natural resonance of cave environments. What exactly might have been their effect on participants in ritual, and does this provide some idea why the Great Pyramid's dead-end passage would seem to have been designed specifically to generate infrasound? The fact also that similar knowledge was known seemingly to the megalithic culture of the Neolithic Britain, the Lahita Aparash of Papua New Guinea, and even the Upper Paleolithic cave artists of southwestern Europe tells us that the roots of this technology is at least as old as the earliest manufactured musical instrument. This takes the form of a bone whistle found in the Denisovian layer of the Denisovia caves in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia. Here's the Altai Mountains again, which is thought to be around 45,000 to 50,000 years old. As the only thing a person can do when in the dead-end passage is either to sit cross-legged or lie down lengthways, then it really does make sense that its original function involved a person, an initiate or priest perhaps, entering inside it and achieving some kind of altered state of consciousness. This might have been achieved through either the use of meditation or practice, or the achievement of non-REM sleep enhanced, of course, by the effects of the tube's own inherent infrasound, the two resonating in sympathy with each other. Since this rock-cut passage lies almost directly beneath the dead center of the pyramid, any induced sense of otherworldliness when inside it is likely to have been linked with the building's primary function, since this was most likely connected with the eternal nature of the spirit of the pharaohs responsible for the construction, then a close association with the cosmic nature of the human soul and its supposed destination in the afterlife as to be considered likely. This deep cosmic journey involved an ascent to the constellation of Orion and then an onward passage via the Milky Way to the constellation of Cygnus, the entrance to the sky world proper. It is a process outlined in the 4,300-year-old pyramid text found inscribed on the interior walls of several Old Kingdom pyramids, whereby in death every pharaoh automatically becomes the god Osiris. In this guise, the soul's primary goal was to achieve rebirth in the womb of Osiris's mother. She was the sky goddess Nut, who was herself a personification of the Milky Way. Her womb synonymous with the fork in the Milky Way, marked by the stars of Cygnus having achieved entry to the afterlife, and ascending soul of the pharaoh was reunited with both the gods and the ancestors. So, as I was speaking in the number 2 video, that through ceremony, either using sacred plants and chemicals reaction in the brain, or as we have here, frequencies in chambers, they can achieve a sense of returning to the universe or a near-death experience and seeking knowledge and wisdom from the spiritual realm. And if we look in this picture here, we have Nut outstretched with the wings and the solar disc, which can also be represented by the rosette on her forehead, which is her crown chakra. And as I said, when people have a near-death experience, or as John Scott did in his near-death experience using Amanita muscaria, most, if not all, see the light, which is love and God and the source of the creation of the universe. And when the Egyptians and the ancients depicted this disc, I don't believe it has anything to do with our actual sun. At the same time, he or she would become a new star among the so-called imperishable stars, the circumpolar and near circumpolar stars of the northern night sky. All of this would have been played out in a terrestrial sense within the inner chambers of the pyramid, almost as if by doing so it would ensure the success of the soul's final ascension, a classic case of as above, so below. Could it be that the initiate or priest granted access to the dead end passage for extended rituals involving the use of infrasound was somehow able to link their inner consciousness with the building's genius loci, the two merging to quite literally maintain and perhaps even guide its future destiny? If correct, then these findings suggest that the notion of spending an extended period of time inside the darkness of the dead end passage while being bathed in infrasound might well be crucial to our understanding of the true function not only of the Great Pyramid but also of its highly mysterious subterranean chamber, which remains an enigma to this day. It sort of reminds me of the Freemasonic rituals of lying in a coffin, or the ritual of rising from the dead, or the Skull and Bones 322 ritual of lying in a coffin and divulging your secrets to the outside world. And perhaps they got this from an ancient initiation ceremony that once represented something real and now is just a ritual, basically. The story of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, suspension bridge across the narrows of Puget Sound, connecting the Olympic Peninsula with the mainland of Washington State, US. The original bridge, known colloquially as the Galloping Gertie, was a landmark failure in engineering history. 4 months after the opening of the first Tacoma Narrows Bridge on the morning of November the 7th, 1940, it suffered collapse in a wind of about 42 miles or 67 kilometers per hour. The 2,840 meter main span, which had already exhibited a marked flexibility, went into a series of torsional oscillations whose amplitude steadily increased until the convulsions tore several suspenders loose and the span broke up. An investigation disclosed that the section formed by the roadway and stiffening plate girds rather than web trusses did not absorb the turbulence of the wind gusts. At the time, the narrow two-lane roadway gave the span a high degree of flexibility. This combination made the bridge highly vulnerable to aerodynamic forces insufficiently understood at the time. The failure, which took no lives because the bridge was closed to traffic in time, spurred aerodynamic research and led to important advances. The plate girder was abandoned in suspension bridge design. So at the time of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge had been constructed to be the most flexible bridge ever built. So how did a windstorm end up bringing the whole thing down? To understand that, you need to know a bit about how resonance frequency and oscillators work. And that's so resistant buildings vibrating, natural vibrations, the natural frequency of a building. The natural frequencies of vibration of a building depends on its mass and its stiffness, or how flexible it is. The natural frequency for each mode of vibration follows this rule. F, natural frequencies in hertz. K, the stiffness of the building associated with this mode. And M equals the mass of the building associated with this mode. Buildings tend to have lower natural frequencies when they are either heavier or mass or more flexible, that is less stiff. One of the main things that affects the stiffness of a building is its height. Taller buildings tend to be more flexible, so they tend to have lower natural frequencies compared with shorter buildings. So when we saw the experiments with the crystal pyramids, we see that certain shapes have different frequencies also, and that things made of stone, which are obviously heavier, and also if we look at the Tower of Babel, that was made of brick and tar. So transhumanism, the plot to control your life. If our world is not on a direct path to the fulfillment of Revelation 13, 16, 18, and the only alternative is to assume that something with the striking and most uncanny resemblance to the mark of the beast will appear in the not too distant future. In other words, if what the transhumanists propose for our world is not the prelude to the mark of the beast, then I do not know what would be. Their plans for the future fit like a glove with what the Apostle John wrote about the mark of the beast. What is transhumanism? Transhumanism is the combining of machines and human beings. David Tippett, a contributor to the World Economic Forum website, describes transhumanism in this way. It is rooted in the belief that humans can and will be enhanced by genetic engineering and information technology of today, as well as anticipated advances such as bioengineering, artificial intelligence, and molecular nanotechnology. The result is an iteration of Homo sapiens enhanced or augmented, but still fundamentally human. The central premise of transhumanism then is that biological evolution will eventually be overtaken by advances in genetic, wearable, and implantable technologies that artificially expedite the evolutionary process. And I just kind of wonder, is this what the original sin or story of the Bible was? That we have the trees in the garden, we have trees in the Old Testament talking about people being trees. Was the serpent in the garden, did the serpent in the garden genetically mutate Adam and Eve in some way, knowingly, deceivingly, to make them die, to change their genetics? We have this transhumanist movement today that is trying to destroy our genetics so that we live shorter lives. We're just servants to these people, these Nimrods, these Nephilim, or whatever they are, these serpent people, as some kind of commodity that they use to build their utopian world that they inherit. The globalists of our day propose to fundamentally change humanity through means that include the changing of the human DNA, i.e. nanotechnology. Contrary to what the WEF would have us believe, the end result of this artificial biological evolution will be something far different than what God created, as well as what Jesus died on the cross to redeem. Dr. Carrie Madej, in her April 19, 2021 video, defined transhumanism in a similar way as in the above quote, but also warned of its many dire consequences for our future as the elite of the world seek to exercise complete control of our behavior. In November 2017, an article appeared on the Forbes website with the title Transhumanism and the Future of Humanity, 7 Ways the World Will Change by 2030. Here is a quote from the introduction of this article. The transformation will be messy, complex, and sometimes scary, but signals already point to a future of humanity that will blur our identities into transhumanism. Several disturbing statements regarding transhumanism emerged from this Forbes 2017 article. The assertion of the author that transhumanism will blur our identities, however, shocks me the most. It confirms the planned merging of machines with our bodies. Our bodies would remove what makes us human. Who is behind transhumanism? Lets you think that transhumanism is just the aspiration of a few mad scientists. Please note that many of the most powerful and wealthy people in the world openly support the combining of humans and machines as the next step in the evolutionary process. This concept finds its most fervent and outspoken support in the WEF. Its website contains an abundance of information on the combining of humans with machines. Please know that the WEF is not some obscure fringe group. President Biden ran for office under the theme of Build Back Better, a slogan he took directly from WEF as an indication of his support for its agenda. John Kerry, a prominent member of Biden's administration, has pledged the full support of the Biden administration to the Great Reset championed by WEF. An article on the New American website ties together the Great Reset advocated by the WEF and the Biden administration with the push for transhumanism. Under the New World Order envisioned by the proponents of the United Nations backed Great Reset, humans will be merged with machines and technology. Literally, perhaps most incredibly, the deep state globalists behind the efforts are coming out of the closet. These days, they are openly and literally proclaiming their intention to abolish private ownership of property and even fuse microchips in people's brains that will be able to read and manipulate individual thoughts. Please read the preceding quote again. It aptly surmises my research and correctly connects the Great Reset of the WEF with the push for transhumanism, through which it will read and manipulate the thoughts of those under its domain. Notice also the reference to the deep state in the United States in the preceding quote. This refers to those in the US who put Biden in office and now control his presidency. These elite globalists in the US and throughout the world talk openly about their plans for both transhumanism and the Great Reset. Consider this quote from the WEF website regarding the changes they plan for our world under what the WEF calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution, their term for transhumanism. The Fourth Industrial Revolution represents a fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to another. It is a new chapter in human development enabled by extraordinary technology advances commensurate with those of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. These advances are merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that create both huge promise and potential peril. The speed, breadth, and depth of the revolution is forcing us to rethink how countries develop, how organizations create value, and even what it means to be human. Though it may sound benign, on the surface, the purpose of the Fourth Industrial Revolution is not to benefit humanity. No, not at all. It's the vehicle through which the WEF, along with globalists at the United Nations and in America, hope to force people into accepting a tyrannical and Marxist government through which they intend to control the lives of everyone on the planet. The Great Reset agenda necessitates augmenting humans in such a way that will allow those in power to monitor and control their behavior via external computer networks and artificial intelligence. How will the change happen? How will these power brokers augment the makeup of human beings so as to merge them with machines? To answer that question, we begin with the words of Klaus Schwab from the WEF. In a January 10, 2016 interview, he explained that human beings will soon receive a chip in their body in order to merge them with the digital world. Below is another excerpt from this interview. Schwab: and at first, we will implant them in our clothes, and then we would imagine that we will implant them in our brain or in our skin. And in the end, maybe here will be a direct communication between our brain and a digital world. What we see is a kind of fusion on the physical, digital, and biological world. Interviewer: we call someone, we don't even have the reflex to take a device. It's done naturally. The technique continues in the body. Schwab, yes. Interviewer, when will happen? Schwab, certainly in the next 10 years. The following 2 points sum up the essence of transhumanism. Number 1, the process includes augmenting humans into something quite different than what God created, as well as implanting a device inside them that will connect them to the digital world outside them. The plan consists of connecting humans to the digital world, such as a supercomputer that will monitor their behavior for the ultimate purpose of controlling it through the blending of people with machines. At this point, however, it appears that these globalists might have a problem. How do they put such a system in place? The vast majority of people would readily reject the changes that I have described in the post, and rightly so. Some might desire the enhanced artificial intelligence that will come as the result of transhumanism, but not everything else that would come with it. So when we look at the mud flood information, the buildings, the Antiquitech, and we compare it to the human body or the collective consciousness of many people coming together with one intention, and there seems to be a connection with buildings and people, and similar things happen within those buildings and people collectively. We have technologies on top of buildings that resonate. They gain frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies from the ether. The buildings may potentially resonate frequencies that can heal people in their bodies, or they may gather frequencies that can harm people and control people's minds. These buildings are beautiful in their construction and pretty amazing. Did they come from an era when we understood these technologies and used them for good intentions for humanity? Most certainly today, these towers that are going up, these cursed towers, is a quote from Conan the Barbarian, which is a movie about mind control, the power of united people over the power of steel and war. These towers are definitely made for nefarious purposes and not for positive healing purposes of the human community, as the community of God's created people as a whole. I want to believe that what's going on in these old pictures and these old technologies was something that was positive for mankind. But in the long run, there's not a great deal we can do about it except to try to learn what actually happened. We probably never will. And to learn from the past mistakes, or maybe just to go forward understanding how we work as a people, and that we do have power collectively as a group united with intention, opposed to a group united under fear and control. And that as Christ gave us a new heart, that using that heart and intention, perhaps He will return to this earth to finally change this Babylonian class system that has been in for millennia now. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
There was a time, boy, when I searched for steel. And steel meant more to me than gold or jewels.
A needle of steel.
Yes. You know what it is, don't you, boy? Shall I tell you? It's the least I can do. Steel isn't strong, boy. Flesh is stronger. Look around you. There, on the rocks. A beautiful girl. Come to me, my child. That is strength, boy. That is power. The strength and power of flesh. What is steel compared to the hand that wields it? Look at the strength of your body, the desire in your heart. I gave you this. Such a waste.